is really important there is that what we see is from 2 years ago when you were here and we talked about truth and beauty and goodness. It's great to see how we're operationalizing that, how we're actually turning it into concrete actions. And this is something we're going to come to in the conclusion. We're going to be looking at what we can actually do. Because all of this talk, all of this inspiration, all of these ideas are great, but if we don't do something with it, well, nothing's going to change. So we're going to look at that in the conclusions. But before we do, we've got one last speaker, and I'm sure you're going to love this talk, right? This lady has come all the way from California to be with us today, and she comes from a family of ophthalmologists. So naturally, she became a storyteller instead of an eye surgeon. But she's going to tell her story. She is, frankly, an amazing person, an amazing giving person. She is one of the leaders of Service Space, which is an organization which just aims to do good for no other reason than to do good. Please welcome Pavi METHA.
Such an honor to be here. Can you all hear me? Okay, wonderful. Phil mentioned that I'm from a family of ophthalmologists. I have 24 eye surgeons in the family. And I'm a storyteller, like he said. And over the years, I think I've come to realize that telling stories is a little bit like doing eye surgery. Certain stories can help us see the world and ourselves and each other a little bit more clearly. And I hope to be able to share some such stories with you today. So people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. More than 100 years have passed since Oscar Wilde penned those words. And in that time, we've managed to put price tags on things that Oscar couldn't have seen coming, not even in his wildest dreams or nightmares. For instance, today, your company, for $10, can buy the right to emit a metric ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. For $7,500, you can hire a human being to be a guinea pig in risky drug trials. And for $250,000, you can purchase the right to shoot and kill an endangered black rhino in South Africa. We've managed to put price tags on life, death, and almost everything in between. So in a world where everything has a price, what happens to the priceless? This is the Golden Gate Bridge, not too far from where I live. It's arguably the most beautiful and perhaps one of the most photographed bridges in the world. It is a testament to our technical ingenuity, but it is also a testament to our moral failure. This is the second most common suicide site on the planet. This is John Kevin Hines. At 19, he suffered an intense bout of depression and showed up on this bridge. He walked through the crowds of tourists, and he had tears streaming down his face. He was looking for a moment of human connection. And that's when a young woman approached him, and she asked, "Can you take my picture?" She didn't notice the tears, didn't stop to ask how he was doing. John took the picture, gave her the camera, turned around, took 3 running steps, and jumped. He is one of the rare people who've jumped that bridge and actually survived. And one of the most haunting things that he shared since his rescue, if anyone had smiled at him that day, he would not have jumped. A smile. So we live in a time where we have mastered the art of liking each other on Facebook. We have forgotten the art of loving each other in real life. Disconnection is a growing epidemic, and it's not something that's just isolated to teenagers. It is a growing cancer in the workplace. A recent study showed that 70% of all people at work are emotionally disconnected. And of course, we have a price tag for that disconnection. It costs an estimated $300 billion a year in lost productivity. So this is not a social problem or a spiritual problem alone. It is a business problem. It's an economic problem. So what are we going to do? What's the solution? Making meaningful products is good and it's necessary, but it's not enough. There was another recent study that showed the majority of people worldwide would not care if the majority of our brands disappeared overnight. Our sense of purpose doesn't lie in our commodities. It lies in our sense of communion. It doesn't lie in our products. It lies in the realm of the priceless. So what happens when we as leaders and thinkers bring those priceless gifts back into circulation? That's the beginning of something we like to call giftivism, the practice of radically generous acts that transform the world. Giftivism and giftivists have existed through all of history. People like Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, people who believed that when you change yourself, you can change the world. But giftivism isn't just the sole property of social change giants like these. The seeds of it lie within each one of us. But to tap into that, we need to do something that these guys did. We have to upturn one of the fundamental assumptions of economics. The assumption of economics, the base of it all, is that all people act to maximize self-interest. The belief that people are inherently selfish. Giftivism turns that idea on its head. And it asks the question, what practices, what systems, what designs emerge if we assume that people want to be selfless? It's a really powerful question to ask. And service-based evolved as one answer to that question. It started in the 1990s in the heart of Silicon Valley at the height of the dot-com boom. It was a time in history when the dominant paradigm was greed is good. Greed is good. And there was a young group of people who decided to jump off that bandwagon. And they said, we're going to do something different. We are going to build websites for nonprofits free of charge. Money wasn't the focus. The idea and the intention was to practice unconditional generosity. They delivered millions of dollars worth of services, but it was offered up as a gift. And everything we have done since then at ServiceSpace has had to follow our 3 guiding principles. And none of these principles make any sense to the business world. The first principle, stay volunteer run. We have no paid staff. People looked at that and said, you won't scale. Second principle, don't fundraise. We wanted to practice serving with what we had. People warned us that we wouldn't sustain. The third principle, focus on small acts. We wanted to remain humble. We wanted to stay present instead of getting caught up in strategizing for grand outcomes. People told us we wouldn't be effective. But in reality, these 3 constraints forced us to discover new value. We scaled, we sustained, and we blossomed into an entire ecosystem of services that now encompasses 500,000 members around the world. One of the things that we tried to do within ServiceSpace is look for services that are traditionally hard to monetize. Things like good news. Bad news is so much easier to sell. That's why the headlines are filled with the fear narrative, with that, the sensationalism, but it's not where the priceless lies. So we started a good news service, and we started to send every day inspiring real-life stories to people all around the world. We started a platform called KarmaTube, which is like a YouTube except only for inspiring and uplifting videos. We started a portal, a website that helps spread small acts of kindness. We started a generosity-based restaurant and a whole slew of other projects. And in all of these adventures in generosity, we discovered over and over again, generosity is generative. It creates new value. And giftivism organizes around that value through 4 key shifts. The first shift is from consumption to contribution. The average person in the city sees about 5,000 ads a day. The majority of that is subconscious. We don't even realize we're taking it in. So the marketplace primes us to consume. But the truth is, we are hardwired to contribute. And that's not wishful thinking, it's actual neuroscience. Research has shown that when people contribute to worthy causes, it lights up the same pleasure centers of the brain that doing something nice for yourself does, right? Giving literally feels good. And we don't need neuroscience to tell us that. We know it from experience. All of us have had that experience. So within Service Space, we started to experiment with unleashing a series of micro contributions. We started to do small acts of kindness. Things like paying toll for the person behind you at a toll booth, or buying coffee for someone, a stranger, at a cafe. Or we had a friend who was traveling business class, and spontaneously he decided to swap seats with an elderly woman who was traveling in economy. Now imagine being that woman, receiving that gift. What does it do? It fills your heart. It shifts the way suddenly that you look at the world. These counterculture acts, they're very small, but they light up the giver and the receiver. It's a win-win situation. And the thing is, generosity is not a zero-sum game. Then we created smile cards. These are small pocket-sized cards that you can carry around and pass on when you do a kind act. They tell the receiver, someone reached out, someone you don't know reached out just to make you smile, just to make your day. And you can't pay them back, but you can pay it forward. You can do something kind somewhere else for someone else and keep the spirit of this going. So this card becomes an invitation to unleash ripples of good wherever you are. Imagine a world where everyone walked around with these cards in their pockets, waiting for an excuse to make someone's day. This is important. It's not because it's some sort of feel-good exercise, right? This is important because as you do these things, it starts to rewire the way your mind works, individually and collectively. You stop walking through every door and asking in every situation, what can I take? Instead, you're asking, what can I give? What can I offer? What do I have to share? And when you make that shift, you start to catalyze a rich network of ripples, right? You start to tap into the joy of purpose. There's a beautiful quote from Gandhi. He said, the fragrance always remains in the hand that gives the rose. Priceless. Then there's the second shift, from transaction to trust. Karma Kitchen is a prime example of this. Now, this is a restaurant that we started in Berkeley, California, and the unusual thing about it, there is no prices on the menu. At the end of the meal, guests receive a check for $0, and there's a note that explains, this meal comes to you as a gift from someone who came before you. And if you wish to pay it forward, you can make a contribution for someone who comes after you. To be honest, when we started this, we didn't have any clue whether it was going to work or not. Right? But the thing is, when you count on people to be generous, and you hold a context for that, and you create the systems for that, amazing things happen. It ignites something deep inside. So we had a volunteer once. He was a brilliant computer scientist, first time serving tables at Karma Kitchen, and he got the guest who was the most skeptical about this whole pay it forward idea. And so at the end of the meal, this guy calls the server over and gives him a $100 bill. And he says, you trust me to pay it forward? Well, here's the thing. I trust you to bring me back the right change. Not part of the plan. So this guy, he goes to the back, analytical guy, so he's running through all the permutations and combinations of what he can do. Should he split it 50-50? Should he try and calculate the average price of a meal? Should he try and see how many, mango lassis that guy had? What's he going to do? And then suddenly, the answer comes to him, and it came from within. He walks back to the guest, hands him the $100 bill, then opens his wallet, takes out another $20, and says, sir, here's your change. And in that moment, both the guest and the server got what Karma Kitchen was about. They experienced a mini transformation, and it had nothing to do with the money. When you drop that habitual mindset of quid pro quo, you drop into the flow of giftivism. Things start to move beyond the control of your personal ego. You don't know where the gift came from, you don't know where your contribution is going to go, but you trust in the cycle of the whole. And in that context, every contribution becomes an act of profound social trust. And that kind of trust creates a web of resilience. Today, there are 6 Karma Kitchens in cities around the world. Third shift, from isolation to community. The me mindset is super isolating, and it's not very effective. But when you move from me to we, what happens? This is Pancho. He is one of the most fearless giftivists I know. And he lives by choice in a community in East Oakland. It's a neighborhood that's full of gang violence, poverty. There are more liquor stores than grocery stores on every corner. And yet the doors to Pancho's house, Casa de Paz, are never locked. There's a garden in the back where they grow fruits and vegetables. He does outdoor yoga classes for the community. He holds a weekly meditation gathering. Every weekend, he and his friends go around the neighborhood gathering unharvested fruit and vegetables from trees and fields. They organize this. This is Fruta Gift, where they gift vegetables, fruits, organic, ultra-local, to families in the community. And why is this important? It's important because it creates a context for people to share their gifts with each other. That neighborhood has been transformed. People there now clean the streets together. They grow gardens. They water each other's plants. They take care of each other's children. This is a place where when they used to hear bullets, gunshots, they would hide under their beds. Now they run out into the streets to see who needs help. When you move from isolation to community, you tap into the power of synergy, and you discover that the sum is always greater than the individual parts. The fourth and final shift is from scarcity to abundance. Scarcity is really a mindset. Gandhi once said that the world has enough for every man's need, but not enough for every man's greed. So when you move from that mindset of scarcity to thinking, I have enough in this moment, you start to discover new forms of capital. Money is just one form. You start to discover social capital, trust capital, synergy capital, and you start to unlock breakthrough models of abundance. That's what happened with this man. This is my granduncle. And it's such a joy to be able to share a little bit of his story with you. 37 years ago, he started an 11-bed eye clinic in southern India. No money, no business plan, no safety net. They had 11 beds, the country had 12 million blind, and his mission was to end needless blindness. They said, we're not going to turn anyone away who comes to us for help. 60% of the work that they do is done for free. They don't take any donations or do any fundraising, and yet they are a fully self-sustaining institute. How do they do this? The way it works is patients decide whether they want to pay or not. Those who can pay do, and they help cover the costs for those who can't. It is a simple, elegant, and breathtakingly compassionate system, and it really works. Quality outcomes are world-class, and whether you pay or not, you get the same high-quality treatment. Today, Aravind is the largest eye care provider in the world. They have seen over 38 million patients. They've done over 5 million surgeries. The majority have been done for free or at ultra-subsidized costs. They have redefined the impossible. Harvard Business School for the last 20 years has been doing a case on them. They, along with hundreds and thousands of other organizations and social enterprises, are looking at this model and saying, how does this succeed in spite of the fact that it breaks every rule of business? And the thing is, this doesn't work in spite of the fact that it breaks those rules. It works because it breaks those rules. So giftivism isn't some sort of utopian dream for a distant future. It's a priceless inheritance that we can tap into in this moment, and the rewards are built in. When you move from consumption to contribution, you tap into the joy of purpose. When you move from transaction to trust, you build a web of resilience. When you move from isolation to community, you tap into the power of synergy. And when you move from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance, you discover radically new possibilities. I began this talk with the story of one desperate teenager. I'm going to close with the story of another. This is Julio Diaz. As he was walking home late one night from work, he was approached by a teenager with a knife who said, "Give me your wallet." Julio handed over his wallet, and as the boy turned to run, Julio said, "Wait, you forgot something." The boy turned around, and Julio said, "You forgot to take my coat. It's a cold night, and if you're going to be out here robbing people all night, you're going to need this." Now, in the history of robbery, I'm not sure if that's ever happened before, but it had never happened to this boy. He took the coat. And then Julio said, "Are you hungry? There's a restaurant down the street. Would you like to have dinner together?" And incredibly, the boy said yes. So they walk over to the restaurant. And there's Julio. Imagine, he's sitting there dining with his robber and treating him with nothing but compassion. And at the end of the meal, Julio looks over at the boy and he says, "You know, I'd really love to buy you dinner, but you have my wallet." And the boy slides the wallet across the table. And then Julio leans forward and he says, "I need to ask you for one more thing. Can I have your knife too?" And without a word, the knife comes across the table. What we will do for love will always be far more powerful than what we will do for money. What we can do together will always be far greater than what we can do alone. And when we tap into the heart of giftivism, in ourselves, in our companies, in our communities, we begin to unleash our true prosperity. We start to move from being a market economy to being part of something far greater, a gift ecology. And it begins with small steps. I'd like to leave you all with a question. What is your small step today? What is your giftivist resolution? Take a moment to hold that question in your heart. May we take that step. May we change ourselves, and may we change the world. Thank you.
How do you follow that? Pavi, thank you. From here, thank you. Whoa. That was true richness. That was true richness. What can we give? What can we give? And by giving, we can change the world. Such great examples. Thank you so much.